Appreciate it. Okay.
Yeah, here's pen.
Okay. Sign him in now?
Afterwards.
Oh, okay.
Let's do it the same way.
I'm there. Maybe there's chocolate in lieu of the lunch I missed.
Thank you for missing lunch.
Thank you for being here.
This is for community members.
Okay. Something I want to go with it.
Do you want to wait like a minute more?
Okay. Let's see, 1 minute starting.
Yeah, exactly.
That is our 1 minute. Okay. Thank everybody for coming out today. I'm going to do a quick introduction for our speaker. David Tidrington is an instructor of art at Haskell Indian Nations University and visiting lecturer in drawing and painting at the University of Kansas. He earned an MFA from KU in 2013, focusing on landscape studies and the cultural history of body fluids. His undergraduate work was in East Asian languages and cultures, culminating in a 2-week meditation workshop with the Dalai Lama at his monastery in India. David then spent 5 years living on the Japanese island of Shikoku, researching holy sites and practicing types of Japanese meditation. In 2010, David shifted focus and returned to the US to help raise a family and learn United States history and what he calls landscape theology. He is currently artist in residence at the Stockyard Exchange building in Kansas City and has participated in residencies, exhibitions, workshops, and community projects across the country. David researches sites of tragedy, places that tell secret, shameful national stories, such as Japanese internment camps, nuclear test and toxic waste sites, and Indian and settler massacre sites. He says his paintings are intended to bring attention to the environment and to the more than human ground we share with bacteria, plants, and other animals. So please join me in welcoming Mr. David Tidrington.
Can I click out of this?
Yep.
Don't say it. So it truly is an honor to get to be here and speak to the arts leg of our STEAM lecture series on social justice. I want to thank Stacy Freeman and Alexis Clements, Todd Meyer, Kansas Humanities, Highland Community College, all of you for coming, and really everyone that's involved in this event. All the events of our lives take place, which is how Ann Scott Mamade likes to put our situation. And by bringing attention to the landscape, to this place, it's a quick way into indigenous issues, into indigenous justice. And I really like how the New Red Order puts it, that efforts to decolonize are embodied in ritual performances, in ritual acknowledgments of land rights and indigenous presence. And so what we do at Haskell before every teaching event or a speaking event is we acknowledge that we are guests here, and we acknowledge who our native hosts are. And so I'd like to thank the Osage and the Kaw nations, and also the Iowa tribe of Kansas and Nebraska for being our hosts, our native hosts today. And I also want to thank all the other tribes that came before them. And if I slip up in my story today, if I make any mistakes, please feel free to correct me. You can chime in. Also, if you'd like to add anything to our story, please chime in and don't at all feel like you're interrupting. I think there will be some time at the end for questions. But, yeah, like I said, feel free to interrupt. We're here today to talk about what contemporary Native American artwork is up to. And also, maybe if we can learn something, we might get a chance to get an indigenous perspective on what is going on in the United States right now. All the works that we look at today will give us a chance to reflect on current indigenous issues, but also we can take note on the state of ourselves, what it means to be alive in what is currently called the United States of America. And our question for the day: what does it mean when indigenous artists remix images from the dominant culture, or practice what we might call anti-colonial native pop art? And to be more specific, I want to look at this ongoing tradition of repurposing the American flag. I'll try to cover as many contemporary artists as I can, and we will look at pictures until we run out of time or until we run out of attention. So, my introduction is Nicholas Galanin's "The American Dream is a Lie and Well." A fun little play on words there. Galanin is enrolled Tlingit and Paiute from Alaska, and he also identifies as a mixed-race artist. And we see here an assemblage, a mashup, or a remix of a number of culturally specific materials, including 50 caliber bullets, gold, and an American flag. We will see this treatment of the flag, turning it into a rug, also turning it into a blanket again and again. So our central metaphor today is remix, which is a kind of repurposing, sampling, remaking, taking material from the world and indigenizing the materials. Sometimes in a stereotypical way, as you see with James Luna, he adds beads and feathers, anything stereotypically Native American, in order to indigenize. But also we see non-stereotypical ways, such as Edgar Hebebird's, who uses text in his paintings and in his installations. Here he has created a highway sign, and he's used actually the manufacturer of the actual highway sign. So his highway signs are identical to the real ones. But it's interesting because this sign that usually motorists trust to communicate distance, he's turned it into a sign that communicates resistance. Also, I love it because he's hacking into the signs of the state, literally the signs of the state, and using their authority against the state. What did Picasso and Steve Jobs say? Good artists copy, but great artists steal. And remixed objects, hybrid objects, they're really everywhere we look. And they can kind of get annoying, right? All of these remixes. I know I'm kind of sick of hearing Simon and Garfunkel remakes. They're so derivative and boring. We are bombarded today by memes and movie and TV show remakes. There's this kind of copy-paste aesthetic going on. Nothing's original anymore. Another Batman? Come on. But also at the same time, remixing means making things new. And there's a magical metamorphosis, pure creation, simply by bringing together materials that are already there in a new way, provided by the environment and therefore also reflecting the environment. And this approach to art making and information sharing is rampant across platforms and media, which is one of the reasons why our culture has been dubbed remix culture. Remix culture is defined as a society that allows and encourages derivative works by combining or editing existing materials to produce new products. That's us. And in his book, Remix Culture, Lawrence Lessig, who is Harvard Law professor and the founder of the Creative Commons, he relates this phrase of culture to computer file sharing permissions, which I find really, really interesting, especially as related to indigenous art. Lessig points out that there are two types of files. There's read-only files, RO, and then there's also read-write files, RW. And we are currently watching the older form of media sharing shift into the other as more and more people learn how to program. Program or be programmed, as Douglas Rushkoff puts it, media theorist. And I think this metaphor is extremely useful when looking at indigenous art. We can see now that colonized people repurpose and remix the dominant culture symbols and materials in order to rewrite them as a way to exercise a degree of agency and autonomy. Just last month, Merritt Johnson released this new installment of her Exercising America video series, DIY video series on YouTube. And in the film, which I encourage everybody to look at, it's pretty short, about 10 minutes. In the film, we hear her calming voice explain exactly how to create a ladder out of an American flag. She's cutting up the material and remaking it something new, something useful, in her opinion. And the instructions are given both in English and in Spanish. And I asked Johnson to discuss why she remixes the flag, and she says, quote, "The U.S. flag has been used as a symbol of settler claim, ownership, and to assert the sovereignty of a settler government on indigenous land. It's present at borders and federal and state buildings and parks as a reminder that there is no public land. There is no acknowledgement of indigenous connection to land alongside the U.S. flag, as many indigenous nations have flags. So I make the flag into something that functions to oppose the power and sovereignty of U.S. border enforcement, which makes sense to me. It's a simple action, and it's a form of creation through destruction, which is sometimes necessary. It connects to it connects to so much of life and survival in terms of how energy is converted and how living things survive. Remixing is a form of agency as well. It makes space for multiplicity and intersectionality of voices and experiences. This is also a project that Merritt Johnson is known for. She weaves basket bombs, which is an interesting visual punning, visual metaphor that indigeneity is used as a weapon against colonialism. So this remixing, we see a reciprocal relationship now between the producers and the consumers, and the colonized people can encode their own histories into the dominant symbol, thus ensuring its survival because dominant symbols have staying power. And one striking example of this trickster Native American remixing is the Mickey Mouse Kachina dolls that were very popular in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. This universally recognizable artwork is actually the Hopi Mickey Mouse Kachina Tucson Homichi. The joke is on us if we thought that it was Mickey Mouse. And Tucson Homichi is an ancient Hopi hero. He's a legend. He's almost like a god. And the Kachinas mean that there's a Kachina dancer that also enacts or uses his body as an antenna to capture the dance of the legendary hero. And he's also famous for his black and white war paint. Of course, here we see Tucson Homichi using that black and white war paint to turn himself into Mickey Mouse. After Mickey hit the silver screen, his popularity and power may have actually helped sell the Kachinas, thus ensuring economic survival for the artisans. After all, the large energizes the little, like the atmosphere energizes a flame. But really, depending on your view, the power can go both ways, and maybe Mickey Mouse took off so quickly in this country because we all had Tucson Homichi already dancing and whistling in our subconscious. It's also important to note that Walt Disney collected kachinas, and he collected Native American paintings, and he was very interested in indigenous stories. But there's also some dark humor going on here. Here is Tucson Homichi kachinas. What Tucson Homichi did was he was able to kill the big hawk that was destroying his friends and family. And the way that he did that, much like David and Goliath, is that he was able to collaborate with the natural world and to use the strength and speed and confidence of his adversary against him. He had a hidden spike in the ground, and through his quick maneuvering, he was able to get the hawk to impale himself onto the spear. So this is an interesting metaphor because Tucson Homichi means dirty mouse or dirty rodent, which was one way that the indigenous people of the Southwest were described. And of course the hawk in the story can stand in for the eagle, the symbol for the dominant culture. So there's some humor going on here. I'm also reminded of the way that these hybrid objects can emerge. Is Tucson Homichi wearing the mask of Mickey Mouse, or is Mickey Mouse wearing the mask of Tucson Homichi? It's not clear which is the dominant cultural influence. So sometimes these objects are called double objects or double agents in anthropology and in the literature. And I'm reminded of this hybrid being. We have a Native American Mother Mary, Our Lady of Guadalupe. The story is that an indigenous American saw Mary and saw an indigenous face. So it is a Native American mother. And of course, the cynic in me thinks, what's the easiest way to convert a people? You make the deity look like them so that they can relate to it. But also, what's the best way to stay in connection to your people? Make the deity look like you so that it's a continual reminder of your own home and your own ancestry. So we see a Native American Mother of Christ. We see a Native American Mickey Mouse. And now we might have a better view to appreciate the Native American flags. Textile scholar Kate Kent names this as one of the first pictorials woven by a Navajo woman. It's purposefully incomplete. We get to see its guts. Half of the textile depicts a version of the American flag. It's almost the same, but not quite. And then the other half is an eye dazzler, which is named for its brilliant colors and optical designs. The visual glitching is oddly contemporary, and the top reflects the bottom. Also, this is art for art's sake. It was meant for a wall and to be used as a type of conversation piece. And to the initiated, this isn't just the American flag. Those crosses, those aren't just stars. For example, for the Navajo, the cross is a symbol for the 4 holy mountains, which is the Navajo homeland. And also the 4 winds, which are 4 gods. Also, that looks like a constellation in the center. It could be Cassiopeia, which is a mother, a goddess. It could also be the bottom of Sagittarius, the Scorpio, which is a rabbit. Nevertheless, what I find interesting is that this symbol of America also is a symbol for Navajo religion. These stripes harken back to the first phase chief blankets. So the stripes already signify power and honor and indigeneity. Jenny Ann Taylor, she's kind of making explicit what indigenous artists make implicit with the flag. She here is beating the flag, and those stars, they never really were stars, huh? They represent the states, the union. What's our state motto? Ad astra per aspera, to the stars through difficulty. They're not talking about to the heavens, they're talking about to the union through difficulty. So Taylor is making that explicit by replacing the stars with the states, literally. And then in the field of blue, the blue sky behind the states, are prayers. And then within the red blood and the white bone stripes are the names of tribes. Specifically, how many tribes did she get done? 456 tribes. I saw a similar flag the other day at the grocery store called the Flag of Honor, which fills in the stars and stripes with victims of 9/11. Velma Key Craig, here we see another Navajo rug, a woven flag. And then for the stars portion, she says, quote, I duplicated a QR code off of a sign posted in the front yard of a home in my neighborhood that was currently in foreclosure. So she's indigenized the flag by changing the materials, the wool, but also by subverting the symbols to reflect important indigenous issues. This trend of beating the flag and of weaving the flag, it's really common. We look at the mid to late 19th century whimsies that were sold at Niagara Falls specifically, or we can see these sort of kitschy souvenirs that were sold in the Southwest by Navajo and other Pueblo tribes. It was neither infrequent nor geologically isolated. Rugs were woven to look like American flags, and they were meant for the floor and for people to step on them, and I think that there's a kind of dark humor there as well. When does the flag become a flag? When does the simulation turn into the actual, or when does the representation become a presentation? With the flag, it's not very clear. Well, let me go back, actually. What's interesting, though, is that the indigenous artisans, they knew that the white tourists loved their flags, and so they embellished a lot of their objects with the flag, really just to make money, and that makes sense. There's nothing really strange there. But what is strange, what is a mystery in our story, is the Lakota. The Lakota embellished, and they embellished more flags onto their objects than all the other tribes put together, and they never sold them to the white market. These were used internally as tribal art, as sacred tribal objects. So I find this really interesting that any tribe would adopt the use of the American flag, considering the government's history of genocide and violence and oppression towards them. I imagine, superficially, that it would be like a Jewish artist deciding to make swastika artwork to sell to the Nazis. Given the horror of the symbol that the flag represents, why in God's name would a native artist embroider it onto their sacred objects? But then again, these look like American flags, but they're not, are they? They're almost the same, but not quite. And it's in this not quite that we are supposed to read parodic, maniacal rebellion. According to Homi Bhabha, the great English Indian post-colonial theorist, he says that this is an example of strategic failure, which is a strategy or technology of survivance employed by colonized people so that, quote, mimicry is at once resemblance and menace. This is from Bhabha's chapter from his 1994, The Location of Culture, called Of Mimicry in Man. Mimicry, mimesis, memes. It's our earliest and simplest definition of art, but what's absolutely brilliant, I think, is how native artists mimicked and remixed the flag design to reflect their own values. Baba, he points out that colonized people all over the world do this. They mimic the dominant culture to fit in, a type of camouflage. And of course, that helps disarm and decrease racial tensions. But also, they wear and display the dominant culture symbols ironically, to own them, if you will. It's like they're exercising their right to read-write file sharing. And it also helps indigenous people live in this liminal, fugitive place between mimicry and mockery, between assimilation and resistance. And so I think these objects, they're a window into that kind of liminal space, but they're also that space's window into us. So they remix the flag to blend in, to parody, but also to indigenize. And this is done by replacing colonial materials or symbols with indigenous ones. Most notable is the representation of the stars as crosses. We see it again. Although the cross means something different to the Lakota, it's still a sacred symbol. The polysemous cross, it symbolizes the four directions, which again is not the four mountains that demarcate the Navajo nation, but it is the four directions of the universe to the Lakota. But it also demarcates the center of that universe, which is the Black Hills. Also, it's used to represent the morning star. And the morning star is addressed in prayer, in vision quests, and in other ceremonies. It's that tiny light that heralds the larger dawn. Also, as Venus, the morning star, the cross can symbolize white buffalo calf woman, Tashtawi, who is the Christ-like character or deity to the Lakota. She's the one who appears in the sky and gifts culture to humanity in the form of the chanupa, or the holy pipe. And one of my students actually pointed out that the popular image of buffalo calf woman standing and presenting the pipe makes a cross. Mm-hmm. The cross also represents the horizon and the above and the below, all united, heaven united with earth. So we see the symbol. It's not as a way to fit in, but it's actually as a way to stand out. It's a way to resist the colonizing thrust of contemporary culture through participation in it. It's almost an aikido, using the power of the opponent against them. Any questions or comments so far?
I do have one. A lot of these artifacts, are they artifacts or art? I mean, are
Good
they
question,
recent things, or are some of them old?
These are all from the late 19th century, so 1890 or so.
How about that Kachina that looks like Mickey Mouse?
Those are from the 30s and 40s.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
So the Lakota didn't sell, like I said, any of these flag-embellished items. In fact, collectors didn't want anything that looked like it had been contaminated by modern or Western symbols for the Lakota. And this has something to do with the Wild West, the Buffalo Bill shows, and how Plains Indians were considered, you know, the real American Indians, sort of the stereotypical Indians. Also, it's important, not all Plains Indians used the flag and embellished their objects with the flag. So there's meaning there. There's also meaning in where we don't find it. And most noteworthy are the Crow, the neighbors, the Lakota neighbors and adversaries. They shared so much material culture, but the Crow never, not once, embellished their objects with flags. Of course, this could be because they actually fought with the U.S. government, along with the Pawnee, against the Great Sioux Nation and the Cheyenne and the Arapaho, and they lost. But I was thinking maybe there was this idea that they would fight with the U.S. government, but they would never actually incorporate the flag. You know, they draw the line somewhere. They won't incorporate the flag. Here we see Red Cloud, the great Lakota warrior. We see that he decorated his home with the flag, and he's holding the flag there. Before the mid-19th century, the flag could stand for an important event. So it's a symbol, it's almost like a mnemonic device. And we see this most notably in the Lakota winter counts, which are pictographic calendars. The American Horse Winter Count, which is on the right, we can see that the year 1805 and 1806 depicts two American flags. And this probably represents the contact that they had with Lewis and Clark that year. Now, I do not know if those flags represent Lewis and Clark, or if they were flags that were presented to the Lakota. But around 1876, we see the flag represent victory over the U.S. government. Remember, the Lakota and other members of that great Sioux nation, they were the only nation to defeat the U.S. government twice, and they're very proud of that. So when they use a flag, it's almost like using a scalp. They captured the flag, and therefore they are the owners of the Stars and Stripes. They earned them. So I find that really interesting, because after Custer was killed and the cavalry was defeated, maybe then the flag, the power of the flag could flow into the Lakota bodies and the artwork. And there are stories of them, let me go back here, there are stories of them counting coup with the flag. Counting coup is when you run up to your adversary and you touch them as a way to not only express your own bravery, but to humiliate them. So the flag was used in that regard. And also we find flags used in war shields. And I really like Marcus Ammerman in our theme remixing, because what he does is he takes vintage hubcaps, which already are kind of symbols for America, and then he attaches objects that he finds around his home, including strips of fabric, or in this case it's the American flag. And war shields traditionally include symbols, magic symbols, visionary symbols, and also objects that contain power. Of course, here Ammerman is he's including some objects that are stereotypical. I see a toy Indian up there, and some other objects that you would not expect to see there. And he says that these are meant to mirror society. The shields are little totems of power. And he says that he often feeds on the world for artistic inspiration. So, this is a bundle, Pawnee bundle. Remember, Pawnee also, with the Crow, they fought against the U.S., they fought with the U.S. government, and so they didn't use any flags in their art, except we do find that there are small American flags inside of this bundle that is kept at the Pawnee Indian Museum's State Historic Site, the oldest state-funded historic site. And this is interesting because other objects that are included in bundles are umbilical cords and placentas, mummified placentas, and hair, and all other kinds of holy objects. And we pledge allegiance to the flag, and I think it's interesting that natives would have seen the Europeans treat the flag with great honor. I mean, these sacrilegious foreigners, they may have seemed like they didn't consider anything holy except for these colored pieces of fabric, which they did have extensive protocols and taboos surrounding their display. What are some of those? I think there's a dozen or so that you can find. The flag code. What are some of those? Anybody want to throw out some that you know of?
The ground.
They can't never touch the ground. Yes, good. What are some others?
Not supposed to put on anything disposable.
Okay, yeah. Anybody know any others? Can you wear them?
No.
You're not even supposed to touch them. I mean, they're living beings according to one chapter of the flag code. They are considered alive, which seems there's kind of animism, almost a supernatural power there, even though it's secular. Also, they can't ever be used as a bag to contain things. So Erica Lord, she's kind of taking up that the bundle, using the flag as a bundle, but in reverse. Here she has ripped apart the American flag and taken the red stripes and turned them into prayer ties. The Lakota also, they will often use prayer ties as a type of healing practice. Usually, though, the bundles are full of tobacco, which is a numinous holy substance to the Lakota. Here, Erica Lord is filling her prayer ties with dirt from the various reservations. It's a close-up. And she installs this in a mirrored room to give you the sense of countlessness. She specifically is, each prayer flag represents a broken treaty. And let's see, there's 371 broken treaties represented in her installation. According to the Lakota artist and founder of the National Native American War Monument Project, Lynn Burnett, Sioux warriors made a deliberate practice of capturing flags whenever the opportunity arose, just like scalping. After defeating the cavalry unit, the Sioux tribesmen would take the flag and wrap themselves in its colors, and in doing so, they attempted to take the power of the United States, put it on themselves, and then use the power against the enemy. So this is transference. This is a type of sympathetic magic. What I also find interesting is that it was also used as code. The warriors who defeated Custer and the 7th Cavalry, they had to keep that a secret because they were wanted men. Yet also they were proud of what they did and they needed to display that history. So the American flag in this case would signify that this was a warrior who killed Americans. And I find that very funny, like an inside joke that only the initiated would understand that. He's not at all honoring the United States in that typical way. But no, this is a way to understand his war history. Also, inverted flags. This may be, some scholars consider this to be just a mistake. But I don't think so. It's really interesting, also in this ledger art, we see the flag is inverted, and the soldiers would not have had time to invert the flag during the battle. I think I heard one historian say that the entire battle took as long as it takes a hungry man to eat a meal. I mean, Custer and his cavalry were just wiped out. And so what the artist is doing here is perhaps inverting the flag for them. Here we also see the flag inverted. The dance lodge is also a war dance lodge. The inverted flag may have also been a reminder of Little Bighorn in that or what was his name? Sitting Bull. He had a vision before the battle of soldiers falling upside down into the camp. And so I've also read that it could be a way to retell that story. Also, since the 60s, the inverted flag has come to also represent aim. AIM, the American Indian Movement. AIM, who occupied Alcatraz in 1969 and who occupied Wounded Knee in 1972, who infiltrated the Bureau of Indian Affairs to uncover documents that record how from 1973 to 1976, more than 3,400 indigenous women in the care of the U.S. Indian Health Services were sterilized without their consent. AIM, Red Power. Ever since AIM began using the flag upside down, sometimes with the solidarity fist superimposed, it's taken another meaning, and it has that other context. Here we can see Russell Means, one of the founders of AIM, painted with wearing the American flag. And then Frank Big Bear uses the inverted AIM flag in his collage. And here, the New Red Order. Performer Laura Ortman, informant, she plays in front of a projection of the upside-down flag, almost like a curtain or a backdrop, which, remember, is a sanctioned symbol for distress. The New Red Order, they enlist a rotating cast of informants, including Erica Lord, and they use video and performance to create a site of acknowledgement. Savage pronouncements is what they call it, calling out or calling in, recruitment and cumulative interrogation to shift potential obstructions to indigenous growth. And their name is not just a nod to the New World Order, but it's also a reaction to, or a contradistinction to, the Improved Order of Red Men. Have you heard of this organization? The Improved Order of Red Men is a secret society in the oldest fraternity in the United States. The female version is the Improved Order of Pocahontas. They're a classic organization that plays Indian. They dress up like Indians and they pretend to be Indians, which actually is a powerful U.S. pastime that goes all the way back to the Boston Tea Party. Greg Deal, here is his indigenous flag, and we can see the chevron and the cross patterns and the inversion. Here we also see the tradition of wearing the flag. Richard Ray Whitman, he took this picture as everyone was paying attention to the boats for the quincentennial celebrations of Columbus. He decided instead to focus on an indigenous man whose back was turned to the ocean. Here are more examples of this tradition of wearing the flag inverted. Fritz Scholder, who is a Senyo painter, he had this great style of combining abstract expressionism with pop art. And here's his American portrait with flag. Notice how the face is unfinished. And then Harry Fonseca often depicts Coyote dressed up as Uncle Sam, dancing, shuffling. And then this isn't an Indian artist, well, it's an Indian artist, Anu Pala